Hello and welcome to At the 55, your home for USports football. Me and Tom are back on the mics breaking down week 4 in the OUA as well as all the action around USports. We're going to get a little story time with Tom and his adventures out in UBC, his conversations with Coach Blake Nill that you'll get later this weekend. So much more. But first, Tom, how the heck you doing, my friend?
I'm doing so well, my man. It was so incredible to be out in the Canada West to watch the game and to be a part of the game in a certain way, helping to call it and all of that. And we'll get into that story time, but I am happy to be back home in the Hammer along with my OUA football. But I gotta tell you, the more and more that I've been watching it, the more and more I am being a converted Canada West fan. It is so electric in that league week after week.
Well, and just to peek behind the curtain, Tom, you and I were talking earlier today of like what's our actual plan of like release of something that's going to be a little more CanWest focused. So we're cooking that up a little bit. But for those of you tuning in from anywhere around the country or outside the country, because we get some really great international listens too. Firstly, thank you so much for tuning in wherever you are and whenever you're tuning in. But as far as any more CanWest deep dive content, give us your thoughts and we'll take that into consideration as we think of what else we could do because the football is so great. And we're going to go through those games and talk about, of course, the amazing matchup out of the RSEQ with Laval Montreal and a wild game out of the AUS with Santa Fe and Bishops. But we got to start with the OUA and we're going to start with our players of the week. Tom, let's start with the offensive day that happened in the nation's capital. Where are we going with this one, Tom?
I mean, we talked about Scott Barnett and how he looks to be the front runner for the OUA MVP. And then it was like this young man just said, hang on, hold my beer. I got to go do something real quick. Ethan Dolby goes off against the Carleton Ravens, 18 attempts, 230 yards on the ground, and 4 touchdowns. The wild thing about that, in the 230, his long of the day is only 33 yards. So that's just grind him out, pound the football all the way down the field. He averaged 12.8 yards per carry. That's nuts.
It's insane. And just the number of times seemingly untouched. Like it's really the O line to me that's getting that credit. But no, of course, Dolby ran the heck out of the football. Awesome game there by their whole rushing attack and their whole offense and their whole team. Great job by you, Western. We'll talk about that one in 2 shakes of a lamb's tail. Tom, defensively, there were some great defensive performances all weekend long. It was the weekend of the pick sixes. And we're going to go to one of the guys who got that and pretty well single-handedly won this game for his team, Tom, who's picking up the defensive player of the week.
It's a guy who really went off against your Guelph Griffins, my friend. It's got to go to number 21, Jackson Brashear, linebacker for the Ottawa GGs. 9 total tackles, 1 sack, 1 forced fumble, and 2 interceptions, including 1 game-sealing pick 6. He was all over the field for the GGs all game. He had a hell of a day.
Yeah, no, it's such a remarkable day. And, we'll talk about that one. Great job by the GGs on the day. Tom, that is a game that included 2 special teams touchdowns. I believe there was at least one more. I think Keyshawn Reed in the Western Carleton game. But for our special teams player of the week, we're going to the end of the 401 to a guy who not only had a big day on the stat sheet in terms of the impact of a game, but also in terms of the record books for his Windsor Lancers. Tom, take it away.
It's got to go to Brady Lidster. 5 for 5 on his field goals, 2 for 2 on his extra points. They account for 17 points. But the real kicker, he has now completed 63 career field goals. That's a new Windsor Lancer record. So it has to go to the record breaker himself, Brady Lidster.
St. Thomas's own Parkdale, not Parkdale, Parkside Collegiate, I think Collegiate's own. Great job by him. I think as well the 5 field goals. I think I heard the one and only the legendary Brett Hedges say that the single game record was 6, so 1 away from even breaking another record. Great job by him. Great special team performances across the province, across the country. But let's start in Kitchener-Waterloo, where we had the Battle of Waterloo and a game that was so entertaining from both sides of the ball. We had Laurier picking up the win at home / on the road. On the road, I don't really know what to say. Laurier picking up the win. Final score 41-19. Tom, again, just to add into what the little confusion there was, of course, as we talked about on the preview pod, Laurier was hosting the game, but was allowing Waterloo to be the venue and essentially treated it like a rental so that they could have a few more people in there while some of the stands things are still being figured out with Laurier and the new field and stadium and everything there. First and foremost, though we weren't in attendance for this one, I just want to say from the look of it on the broadcast, from the fact that we got the dynamic duo of Jack Moore and Adam McGuire, which is as good a two-man booth as you'll get in Canadian broadcasting at any level for any sport, and then just seeing this celebration of Kitchener-Waterloo football. It was the purple out, sure, but still obviously a ton of yellow and black. I just wanted to start by saying great job by those two schools, by that football community in putting on what was looked like a really outstanding day. And it was a game that was really entertaining to go along with it. Tom, just generally about the event on itself before we dive in.
Yeah, I had seen on social media Laurier calling out they wanted this to be a purple out to really drive home the fact that this was an away home game for them. And when you saw clips of the stands, which once again, sidebar, Waterloo, outstanding work on the new webcast, the new camera setups and everything. They look fantastic. We actually had a view of the stands and there was a ton of purple all throughout, not just in the stands, but out on the hills as well. So shout out to the Laurier community. I know it's in the same city, like 15 minutes away, but just the fact that you're getting out there, it was really great to see and a really exciting football game, at least in the first half here.
Yeah, and in terms of on the field, we went into this game with the question of whether we were going to see Cal Wither really pop off in this one, and in terms of Waterloo's defense thus far being really strong and how they were going to mitigate a Laurier offense that's arguably as good as anyone else in the country. And amazingly, I'm leaving this game both saying, you know what? Cal Wither, 19 for 25, literally a yard shy of 300, and the 4 clean touchdowns without a pick in sight. Awesome day. We'll talk about the rushing game, not just what Tayshaun Jackson, how he finished with the 126, but how they just committed to running down the middle. But at the same time, I'm coming out saying, okay, I get it. 41 points, but especially in early on that first quarter and in probably about halfway through that second quarter as well, because Laurier got some points late in there, I was still saying to myself, man, I do really like Waterloo's defense, particularly that I felt they were able to slow down earlier on Laurier's rushing attack, and they just kept insisting to run between the boxes, between the tackles, which I liked for them. But you know what? Good job on both sides getting a great day from Cal and his supporting cast. We can go through the details, but I still felt like Waterloo's defense is showing really promising signs.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, this game, yes, it was 24-10 at halftime, but like as you mentioned, all 24 of Laurier's points come in the second half. So that first quarter, they were really doing their thing. It was only until, and we'll get into the unfortunate side, but I don't know. It was just really impressive to see how they were working, what they were doing, and the fact that they are limiting one of, if not the most potent offense across the country here is really outstanding. Once again, you've got a guy like an Ethan Jordan coming across the middle with a little crossing route, and he just showcases his speed, takes off for 88 yards and a touchdown. But he's stopped a couple of times. Not he stopped, but the ball is batted down. There's good coverage on him for a little while. There's a lot of really great pieces to this Waterloo defense, and I'm still really excited about this Waterloo team in general.
And it had that feel of a few times for Waterloo where offensively they didn't quite maybe execute in a key moment. And then Laurier gets you right afterwards. And it's the same thing we talk about with Western all the time, where if you make a mistake, and not even a major thing like a turnover or making just like whatever that kind of whatever that might be, but when you don't take advantage of your opportunities, which early on there was a few times where Waterloo was getting a few shots to march the ball downfield, a few shots towards the end zone, and when you don't capitalize, and then Laurier can do that on top of it, it's a real kick in the pants. And then of course when it snowballs so quickly like that, eventually it just gets out of hand. But again, some really strong things early on. From the Waterloo side, offensively, we see Nick Orr aside from a little trickery with the converted QB to receiver and Isaac White taking a handoff and trying to get a pass off. We see Nick Orr with all of the 35 attempts on the day, going 23 completions with that, 2 touchdowns, one interception, a long of 25, 288 yards. Nice day for him coming off the injury. We see him pick up 75 on the ground, which is something that we also know he can do. A few times, though, as I was alluding to, and you had brought to my attention because I had watched all the games in review, a few moments, and I don't know if it's just a bit rusty of coming off the injury, where maybe a decision by him could have been made better or two.
Yeah, the one that really sticks out to me, I believe it's in the second quarter at the time. I think it's only 7-0 for Laurier, and it's a key second down. Waterloo had been driving the ball decently, and Nick Orr rolls out. He's got a guy in the flats. He's got a guy doing a comeback. I think it's Samuel Slocum with like a 15-yard comeback and is wide open. And then he's got a third receiver who's doing a corner route in the end zone, but he is completely covered. And Orr decides to throw the ball in the end zone. It gets batted away. They punt the ball back to Laurier, and that's exactly where that 88-yard touchdown comes from Ethan Jordan on like the very next play. So there's still some things that need to get ironed out here. I think you can especially when it's a tight game against a really good team and the rivalry game and everything else, you want to do everything you can to try to get up on them. It's important to just be able to settle down, take what's given to you, and keep doing what has been working. There was a few times where that Waterloo offense was moving the ball decently and getting into spots, and then a couple of decisions, something similar like that, or, a case where Nick Orr finishes with 75 rushing yards on the day, and it's obviously great, but the moment that he decides to take off and run, his eyes go down, he's looking for a space to run, rather than, I'm going to evade the pocket a little bit more, I'm going to try to look for a guy down the field, where's Basiliga, where's Slocum, and then throw the ball or take off from there, or instead, no, I'm just going to hit the ground and keep running. So some things I'd like to see cleaned up here, but a decent day, let's say.
And as we saw, Ramel Samuel Slocum had his first real breakout day of the season, 7 receptions, 118 yards. And we're seeing this formula that they've clearly really adopted as that comfort blanket for whether it was or whether it was not Basiliga, but whether it was Caban the other week, but in Evan Basiliga, and using a lot of those zone slices where he's cutting across the formation, dumping it off to him in the flats. And as we expected, because we've seen Laurier do this with all teams. They're going to give you that cushion and they're going to rally to the ball. And you were talking about, Wilkins Flaherty as one of those options to maybe chase him around. Jahari Hastings did a great job too, just rallying to the ball and limiting that big receiver in Basiliga from picking up more than, maybe 4 or 5 yards on those little outlet plays there. But good days across the board for the receiving core from Waterloo, a group that, as we've mentioned, there's not necessarily that standout name, but they're using them in key ways to their various strengths. And I think that's really helpful for a guy, Nick Orr, especially him coming off of the injury. Tom, I want to go back to the Laurier standpoint in what they did on the ground game, because it just felt like they kind of almost went in with we talk about this of teams maybe using opportunities against an opponent that's, not on their level, as saying, could we really try to establish something, knowing if this isn't working, then, hey, okay, let's just make note of that and move off of it. I really felt that early on, Laurier just had this emphasis of just going between tackle to tackle, which with Jackson and Scott wouldn't be the types of rushers. Obviously, they have the O-line and they have, big, your boy Parcelidis leading the way to open up those gaps. Absolutely. But not how you would normally think to use those style of backs. But then eventually it would open up some of those larger carries from wearing them down. What did you take away from Coach Galloway's approach in really running in between the tackles a lot with more speedy, quicker runners?
To me, it's kind of the mentality of, you've got an outstanding defensive player. Rather than trying to run away from them to see them chase something down, let's run directly at them. And in that case, I think that's the case that they take that with Omaseni, where you've got a great defensive line there, but that Laurier offensive line really does their thing. And if you run the ball between the tackles continuously, at bare minimum, you always have a game plan for who should be getting up to Omaseni and who should be blocking him. Even if you don't always get to him, if he's shedding tackle or shedding blocks or whatever else, because of the nature of Scott and Tayshaun, of how fast and quick they are, if they make him miss, they take off, and both of them, Tayshaun Jackson, you read off the numbers, but he averaged 7.4 yards a carry. Quinn Scott, 7.6 yards a carry. So that same type of deal where, yes, they're pounding away and they're doing their thing, but once they get past Omaseni, they felt like they had a really good opportunity to just break one before anybody else could try to catch them. And so that's what I take away from that.
And frankly, even just thinking about it more, I'm realizing that the game you were in the house for at Richardson Stadium last week, we saw them do a lot of that as well, and a few
Mhm.
times in actually getting to make pace miss. And if you make pace miss, exactly to your point, you're then in a much more vulnerable position. Again, just like seeing the multitude of ways that Laurier can attack offensively and the evolving nature of it is really special to see. Tom, on the defensive end for Laurier, I mean, really solid game from, the classic cast of characters, Grigorsic, Hastings, Cote had an awesome game. Wilkins, Flaherty, all these, guys that we expect to see. And at one point it dawned on me where it's amazing how like this team is so deep that for a moment, I forget what kind of struck, my memory, but I'm like, oh, wait. And Harner Dollywall we haven't even talked about him now for a week because I guess it's going on over 2 weeks now since his injury in the Windsor game, I believe it was, or perhaps even the week before that, where it's just it really, I say a lot in just saying how talented this team is and defensively, where you can say, oh, right, I forgot they have a guy who at his best is contending as like an OUA All-Star and is one of the best non-lineman defensive players in the league. Right. And they're still really good. Final thoughts that you had about whether it was on the defensive side, other thoughts in this game generally.
No, and like you mentioned, Owen Getz has been playing fantastic for them in that safety position here. But when you've got the list of characters that are there to help them out in that Jahari Hastings, Ethan Bayfield, and all the rest of those guys, along with one of the best defensive coordinators in Ron Van Werkirk, I mean, you're in a pretty good spot to succeed there, regardless of who you are. So it's a testament to this team in general. Once again, I know it's gotten to the point now. It was a few years. Well, it's always Western that people complain about. It's the same thing now with Laurier. How many times you want to talk about how good they are, but like, bro, watch the tape. These guys are so good. It's incredible what they're able to do with a host of characters here, and it's one of those same things where we walked into this, and I myself really walked into this being like, oh, I think Mateo La Quintana is going to go off. He's going to do this and that. And he's been solid enough. His numbers haven't been crazy, but I think it's more so because this is a team defense. It's not a spot where one person's just going to go off and you have to worry about that one spot and then you can move on from it. It's, okay, well, they got La Quintana there, and they've got Andre Butte here. Okay, well, once we get past them, then we're okay. Oh no, it's Ethan Grigorsic is there, and then Josh Connors and Jesse Wilkins Flaherty. Oh, once we get past that, oh no, Jahari Hastings coming downhill with 15 yards of speed, and he's gonna lay. So this defense just has layers and layers and layers of great players who are willing to support in any capacity. And as far as I can tell, obviously we're not in the locker room. There is no ego here. As long as they get a dub, they don't really care who's the one who makes plays. Let's just keep going 1-0, as they say, and move on to the next.
Last point I'll bring up came to mind was that I think was it Jackson Stebbings that we saw get with the injury in this one. I'm trying to recall. Yeah, I don't know if there's an update on that one. Didn't seem great. Seemed like they had the teammates have to support him off the field. So really hoping for all the best there. Tom, if you know anything on that standpoint, nothing that's come to light. Okay, again, hoping the best for him. Because again, another guy where you still say, well, you still got Ethan Jordan, you have Ryan Hughes, you still have Oja Talayo, but it's like Stebbings has such a key part in being able to then when those guys do attract a little more attention of being where Laurier can become so special, right? And again, this is a team that has aspirations of the very, very pinnacle. So thinking about how good they look even without Hartnell on defense, thinking about, well, they may still be okay with Stebbings going down, but if we're thinking like what this team looks like in mid-November, if they're so lucky to still be around, which they obviously have the expectation to be, those are the things I think we need to start keeping a few tabs on. Tom, any final thoughts from this one?
No, this ultimately the game went the way that we thought it was with Laurier picking up the win here. But if nothing else, I went into this thinking, okay, Waterloo defense, we're gonna figure out actually how good you are, and I think we were right on our assessment. They are actually a very solid defense. That's just going up against the number one offense.
And for Laurier, they're taking their talents on the road to take on the Ottawa GGs, a team we'll talk about in literally two shakes of a lamb's tail. Waterloo is staying at home, but actually the host team for the Queen's Golden Gales, who we'll be talking about in a moment as well. But let's make our move to the Royal City to talk about the Ottawa GG's big win against the Guelph Griffins. Final score, Ottawa 30, Guelph 23. Tom, again, this was a game because I'll say it again. I'll probably say it for the first time on this podcast. I'll say it probably again at a later point in this podcast. I was celebrating our boy Dakota Vine getting married yesterday, and it was an amazing experience. Again, all the love to the Vines, and such an awesome moment that was. So I was doing catch-up mode on all these games today, and you had told me, please send me texts throughout your watch of the Guelph Ottawa game, because it was very well, I think you were just curious to see what my reactions were. And I think, to sum it up, it was frustration, because we keep seeing so many parts of this Guelph team look really strong at times, but then just a certain level of it just not clicking offensively. Their lack of success as they drive the ball towards the red zone is very startling. We've seen it now for a couple weeks now. That's frustrating. Defensively, some really good moments, but also starting to see again a bit of that trend of maybe the rush defense being a bit of a vulnerability. And though the game opened up with that spectacular return by the rookie in Stram for the however many yard touchdown, I'm sure I have it right here in front of me, still a lot of question marks about some of those special teams units. Obviously, Denny Ferdinand returning one to the house. He's done that to many teams. He's a great returner. But it just still feels like, for a team where we can see all the talent and beyond just this year, it's like, well, look what they did last year. And yes, very key players left. And we talked about how much that defensive front got hurt with Woodmansey and with Josh leaving that on that D line, and obviously with Mortuzo. But clearly there's enough there where it's like we shouldn't be having these excuses of saying, like, why can't they get together? We love this Ottawa team. They deserve that win, but just frustration is my sort of key theme I'm coming out of now these last consecutive games, with even coming out of the Windsor win.
Yeah. Before I get into anything, there were a couple of fans that reached out saying, they appreciate us and they appreciate us doing our thing and covering the games. But, and I quote, "With that said, I must celebrate the latest news for my Ottawa GGs, your Ottawa GGs, everybody's Ottawa GGs."
Who sent that? I don't know. You can tell me later.
Oh gosh. But yeah, I loved what I saw from this Ottawa team, first and foremost. I liked a lot of what I saw from Josh Jansen. At times, there were things that I wanted him to be a little bit better. Once again, I don't think that we've really seen him play his very best. 22 for 34, 248 yards, one touchdown and one interception on the day. Like, it's fine, but I want to see a little bit more from that. Charles Aslan, a little bit closer to where we expect him. 17 attempts for 87 yards with a long of 34. But I think in this one, offensively at least, for Ottawa, the most impressive guy is Noah Avery. I mean, 8 catches, 112 yards, and a touchdown on that. He was very clearly the best receiver on that field at that time and really doing his thing. But I think that there's some things to clean up on special teams, for sure, for Guelph. I like that defense a lot for the most part. And even when Curtis Woodmansey and Josh Campbell were in there, they still had some issues with run defense at times. But this is easily the most frustrated I have been watching a Guelph Griffin offense. I mean, we talked about this previously. This is by far the worst game that we have seen Tristan Aboud play. 18 for 32, 338 yards, great and everything, 0 touchdowns and 4 interceptions. He just didn't look like he was on the same page with his receivers, and I'm not just putting that all on him by any means. I think that's some of the other receivers as well, and it's once again why it's so important to watch these games rather than just looking at the stats, because you can look at me and say, "Tom, what are you talking about? Receivers." Jared Tessier went off, 8 catches, 156 yards. Once again, we're seeing the same things that we've been seeing all year. Aboud sitting back there trying to find somebody. Nobody's getting open, and he has to force something, and that's where some of the interceptions go. Sometimes the ball just purely sails on him at times. I came out of this really frustrated because even though the offense played terribly, they were still in this game. They only lost by 7 points here. but 14 points coming off of special teams and defense. And at times, defense is completely keeping them in there. I can't remember when it was exactly, but Bood throws one of his interceptions, and then the very next play, Eunice Laird picks it off for a pick six, and so you get points automatically off of that, and the defense is kind of coming out and saving you, and then it's just I was very frustrated not to see more from this Guelph Griffin offense in particular.
And I think there's a lot of ways to look at this and say, you alluded to this in saying like, yeah, this is easily Tristan Aboud's worst game he's played for Guelph. And all the while, you were so like you were in this game to the bitter end. You gave yourself an opportunity at the end to be able to possibly take the lead in a few situations. I mean, again, we obviously talked about the day Jackson Brashear had in him giving him the defensive player of the week nomination, but it's his pick six that gives them the lead in the waning moments. So, you take that away theoretically on the, would be then drive to take the lead in some capacity or at least try and pin Ottawa deep, right? Like you're right in that game, even with having all these mistakes. And that's why I think ultimately, and as far as the running game for Guelph, we see Caleb Sargent come back. That's nice. He doesn't have a major impact, his one nice carry, but we see Donovan Malloy leave, which maybe gives credence to what we played around with the idea of did they maybe rush him back for the Windsor game? Possibly just really knowing they needed to jumpstart the offense. Is it a new injury? Is it just re-aggravating the old one? We really don't know. If you know anything, you can tell us, let us know. Cause it's clearly without Malloy, that rushing attack just can't quite come together. We obviously like what Ottawa does defensively in the front seven with Hildebrandt and Briere. But again, you're in this game despite an awful, sorry, I shouldn't say awful is maybe a bit too strong, but like a really difficult day offensively. But this is where I just want to say, and we were talking about this last week, especially with the top 10 and Guelph being there at 10 and Ottawa right behind. Ottawa is better than Guelph. Like, and it's like, yeah, duh, they won. It's like, but again, like you watch these teams play and we observe like all these aspects beyond just wins and losses points. It's like, so Ottawa right now is the better team. Like I had this in the back of my mind in a lot of these games this weekend of just trying to think, okay, as we approach the midpoint of the season where you can just, again, kind of in your sort of power rankings of things beyond just what the records are, being able to say of two teams who at their best can be really good and arguably at their best, maybe Guelph is better. But for whatever reason, Ottawa's the better team this season. They're more consistent. And the fact that they're able to get plays on special teams, big plays on defense, timely plays offensively, the one Charles Esselin run for 34 yards and he's bouncing off defenders was so great to see. And again, a Jansen game that's like, it can obviously be better, but it probably shouldn't be any worse than about what he did on the day. It's maybe a tick under what we even expect. It's like just such a well-rounded team, on all aspects. And I just feel like consistently we're seeing them win games over the years where it's like, oh, but they got a big play on specials. I don't know what you chalk it up for beyond just saying maybe this is part of however it works out, Coach Belfay's impact on them. But like they just seemingly have these guys that will make these big plays and key moments on every phase of the game that is just always so what makes them such an impressive team to watch. But at the end of the day, I think that's the biggest takeaway. It's obvious because they won, but just Ottawa is the better team.
Yeah, 100%. And right now, once again, it's still relatively early. We're approaching the midway point of the regular season, which kind of breaks my heart because there's already so much football and I need some more of it. But I think we're making a very serious pull here. And I know, like you mentioned, Ottawa right now is better than Guelph, but that idea of putting them into the other tier that we had here, really making that push of like, is Ottawa ready to be included in the like queens of the league and saying like, we're right there. If a couple of bounces here and there, we're capable of beating like a Western or a Laurier or whatever. With that week 2 or week 3 game against Western, I'm less hesitant to say something like that because Western did put a beat down on them pretty good here. But they're entering into that conversation at least. They're entering into, are they that in that top echelon of the OUA? And I think this is a pretty dominant victory here. But I wanted to see more from Guelph. I think the main big takeaway that I'm taking away from this from the Guelph side of things, especially after watching 4 games from them now, I think that I don't even want to say we misjudged, but I just don't think that we truly recognized how much of an impact Kane Stevenson, Vashawn Janusis, Curtis Woodmansey, Josh Campbell, and Anthony Mortuzzo had for this team and in this locker room. I mean, 5 like captain level quality players for this team, and really like all 5 of those spots where I don't want to say necessarily that like all of those positions are struggling by any means, but like if there was a spot that Guelph could use a kick in the pants in, it would be from the receiver spot, and maybe not even a kick in the pants, but just a little bit more help on defense kind of thing. But like, man, I just feel like the loss of those 5 players has really impacted this team.
Yes, I totally agree. And from the defensive standpoint, though, an area of optimism is seeing what I think has to be for the first time all season, Demetrius Masuka,
Mhm.
dress and make plays for them in that secondary. And that is a guy that maybe gets you back a little bit of what Mortuzzo did. I certainly wouldn't compare him in a 1-to-1 to, what Tuzo did on the field. But again, for a little support there and, still starting to see continued improvement from Andre Thompson. I text you right away where at one point he like wraps up Suleiman Kamara and like body slams him. And I mean, Andre's a big dude. Kamara's a big dude and like, been playing OUA football for 3 years to Andre's first, this is his 4th game. And I was like, dang, man, he just continues to impress. So still seeing a lot of those big things. Miles Lafoucauld back as well, which was great to have in there. I'm trying to remember the linebacker's name who had like a would-be interception that he dropped. I'm trying to remember what's his name? Not Costanza, but anyhow, so again, still really positive signs here. And the Eunice Larry play, obviously a huge moment from a player on this defense that we expect to be able to come up with those big plays, the same way we talk about with Ottawa having these timely plays on their side of the ball. But again, we're getting to this halfway point of the year, and we're starting to be able to have a better sense of who these teams are. And I mean, obviously, I'm happy to wax poetic more about Ottawa, frankly, just in all the great things that they did. I mean, Daniel Briere, obviously, Bashir sort of steals the day, if you will. Our guy, Patrick Cumberbatch, with the interception to sort of shut the door at the very end. But just that linebacking core, including Mark Rondeau, and then, of course, Daniel Briere, is a fierce group in sort of totality. But, I mean, gosh, I was joking with this to you and Dakota. It's going to be awkward in 2 weeks or 3 weeks when I'm going into Guelph to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of our Yates, and I'm picking Queens on the road on Guelph's homecoming. I mean, gosh, this is going to be an awkward day for me. I mean, but I don't know, Tom. Final thoughts or whatever else about Ottawa, because really they are truly showing to be a special club. And remember, just for folks listening, we came out of that Western loss saying this is still a team that should probably be in the conversation as ranked nationally in that top 10.
Yeah, 100%. I think if nothing else, they've proved that Ottawa deserves to be in that top 10 for however much that actually means. But like there's a lot of things when you look into this in the grand scope of where things are going to finish. And do I think that this Ottawa team is necessarily ready to beat a Laurier or a Western to get into the Yates Cup? No, I don't think so. But do I think that they're good enough to host a home playoff game? And whoever has to travel to them, unless it's Queens, but I don't think that Queens is going to travel, but it could happen. But if Ottawa hosts a home playoff game and you're forcing a team to drive 4, 5, 6 hours in order to get to the nation's capital to play a game against them, that's already starting off with a huge advantage. And the better and better that those teams can be to force a longer travel, that's only going to benefit you in the long run here. So I think that's a very realistic, attainable goal for these Ottawa GGs going into this one. And I'm very confident in the fact that there's a lot of things to be said about, of course, stats and how well people are playing or whatever, but how well does a team win football games? And when I say that, there's a lot of times, especially when you get into close games, where some other teams that maybe have had losing records previously and are fighting, and maybe they're in a close game. There's things that you'll see where like there's a drop ball in a key moment, or there's a missed tackle in a key moment, or there's just those things where you find teams that in the very last or in those key play or drive defining moments can find an extra gear to make a play and to do something. And those like jump ball moments become almost a little bit more controllable because you've got guys doing that. And that's what I'm seeing from this Ottawa GG's team. Those picks at the end of the game, Jackson Brashear's entire performance, like that's what's starting to make me really excited about where these GGs are and what the future of this could be. The last thing that I'll say about this game in totality, once again, the stats I don't think have this correct, but some of the penalties that this Guelph team took on, it shows here eight penalties for 10 yards. That's mathematically impossible, even if you got the lowest of penalties. But I wouldn't be surprised if they had like 60, 70, 80 yards, maybe even into the hundreds of penalties here. And it just seemed like at the worst times, they had a big play or there was a big run or return and gets called back, or a dumb penalty at the end of a play. There's not one that really sticks out, but it was just kind of like a constant stream of these penalties happening here. So really, really excited for the future of Ottawa, but man, I am so frustrated with those Guelph Griffins.
Well, you brought up the penalty piece, which I had to just quickly pull up the stats on the OUA website in terms of what we're seeing from these clubs, because I think sometimes that's indicative of those other aspects that we were talking about, of just that, I love Ottawa's composure, just like when you watch them as a team throughout like the throws of the game. And I don't think I would say Guelph looks uncomposed at times, but untimely penalties and then those plays where it just doesn't look fully just in sync. Guelph right now is sitting second to UofT in the most penalties accumulated with 37. Ottawa is sitting right near the bottom only with 20. So again, I think that does speak to a little bit of what we're saying here and what we're identifying. Last thing I'll say is, again, we talked about Noah Avery having a great day, and he's making a stellar bid for OUA first team All-Star, let alone second team All-Star at this point. And we love that receiving cast around him. Second week in a row not seeing Romeo Lucier. I think I had that backwards coming out of last week. I think I mixed up him and Robin Coulio, which don't know what the injury is. So obviously if it's something major that's going to keep him out for a longer period of time, and that possible playoff run that you alluded to, that I think is a very live dog for them to host a playoff game. And we'll talk about who they have up next week. They're hosting Laurier. That's going to be a really informative game for us. But assuming whatever is ailing Lucier isn't something that's going to be a season ending or threatening to end the season, the fact that we're now seeing, as we've talked about, Tristan Gilbert-Thibault get a little more run for them, I think in a weird way, if assuming Lucier is coming back, will just help out the totality of this offense. And we keep talking about how we're expecting bigger days from Charles Asselin, and I think he's going to get them. But in some ways, it still just speaks to, obviously they didn't score enough points to beat Western, but you know what? Frankly, they did. Offensively, they put up points. Like, in this year offensively, this team is doing a great job of just doing what they need to do to score points and win games, and it's awesome to see. As mentioning, they are hosting the Laurier Golden Hawks next week. Where I have that up here, 1 p.m. start, and the Guelph Griffins are hitting the road because we got the At the 55 Bowl happening. The second annual, or the second annual At the 55 Bowl, first one from Ron Joyce Stadium. Again, to my Guelph people out there, where's my Mac hater gear? Where's my number one hater? Come on, hook me up. I'll rock it on the show. So if you're coming out to that game, look for us. Come out early and look for us, Tom. I think I threw the final thoughts to you, but again, any last thoughts about this Guelph-Ottawa matchup or these two teams on their own?
No, it's both of these next games for both of these teams are going to be must watch. I think for the OUA fan, I think you're probably going to tune into Laurier versus Ottawa over the at the 55 Bowl at this point. But when you look at Mac and Guelph, holy goodness, do both of those squads need a win? So this is going to be a little bit of desperation mode, and we're thinking like your playoff lives are now on the line here.
It's interesting how I feel like at the start of the season, thinking about this week, I feel like I still would have had the thought that, you know what, Ottawa should be the underdog against Laurier, but I feel like that's going to be an interesting game because we put Ottawa in this something to prove. So these are those opportunities where you have now that shot to prove it. A win against the team in Guelph and a feisty game against your Westerns and the Laurier are very much doing that. On the other hand, though, because I was very bullish, and I'll just to remind folks of the bet that Tom and I made, which is that if Guelph loses the At the 55 Bowl from Ron Joyce, I will ride my bicycle all the way from Ron Joyce to Alumni Stadium in Guelph wearing all of Tom's old McMaster Marauder football gear. So the fact that I'm now having to say, oh gosh, maybe I need a that's going to be that's a live dog as well now at this stage. Again, we're going to do our midweek check-in, our mid-season check-in next week, and these are the types of conversations that we're going to be having. But let's make our way to the nation's capital, where there was a game happening, but it was the Carleton Ravens falling to the Western Mustangs. Final score in this game, Western 63, Carleton 26. Tom, I don't know what we want to talk about with this game. I mean, Ethan Dolby running the hell out of the ball, as we talked about. Jack Kelly still gets 110 and a touchdown. Jerome Rancourt gets a rushing touchdown and a receiving touchdown, which is both like funny in that way that it's like, oh wow, like but it's like also so scary because the fact that it's like you do have an East-West caliber quarterback just on the field, two East-West caliber quarterbacks on the field at all times. We saw the Dasani McIntosh, breakout game from the standpoint of, we know he's had better days than this, and we know he will have better days, but we talked about the idea of like maybe you use a game where it's a lopsided matchup to try and get some of those guys going that hadn't yet. Seth 665, a couple tough drops, one that would have been a beautiful Willie Mays style catch that would have gotten him a nice touchdown. And Evan, 13 for 19, 213, a touchdown, one interception. Like I don't know what to say, man. It's almost like it was, and we'll talk about Carleton. They're now figuring out what they're doing with Barnes and Lefebvre, and man, we're going to talk about them at the midway point. Podcast that we do next week as well. But Western just Westerned all over the place in this one, dude.
Yeah, like this was a dominant showcasing from the Western Mustangs, man. When you look at all of the numbers, and obviously our offensive player of the game goes to one, Ethan Dolby with 230 and 4 touchdowns. But we should be giving a few of these to the Western offensive line as a totality here, man.
Yes.
Like exactly like you said, they ran for 427 yards on the ground. Like that's ridiculous. Jack Kelly with 110 and a touchdown himself. Jerome Rancourt with 41 and another touchdown. Like this is a dominant showcase from the Western Mustangs. And while I don't think anybody else really had any other idea of how this game was going to go, still to see the run game be so dominant across every game that they have played has been a real, just outstanding piece of this. And again, for the people who have been listening to us for a few years, Western run game, that's pretty good. Wow, breaking news there, guys. But like, you have to look at the domination that's happening here, how well that offensive line is really playing. And like, while Ethan Dolby and Jack Kelly are great running backs in their own rights, exactly like you mentioned at the very top of the show, they're not being touched until they're 5-10 yards down the field. And that's all because of the blocking. And shout out to our guy and offensive line coach, Chris Marshall and Sean Jameson. Those guys are really doing some fantastic work with those boys in purple. But man, you want to talk about, I know we just finished talking about the Guelph Griffins and being frustrated with those guys. You and I were frustrated at the very beginning of the season for these Carleton Ravens. Now it's like, what do you want to say, guys? Like this was brutal.
And, it's not frustration anymore because they've just shown us who they are at this point.
Yep.
Which is just a team that's just not nearly the one that we saw last year with a lot of these same players. I feel like so often, we were sometimes critical of a couple of the first team, or not, I don't know, I can't remember if they were first team, but the All Canadians and first team OUA All Stars that Kasim Ferdinand was getting, just because, again, and not to undersell like his impact, he's one of the best receivers Carleton's ever had and one of the most dominant receivers of his era playing OUA football. Let's just get that straight. but there sometimes it was like, like Seth Robertson. I get it. Like they're like you have Mohsen Jamal and you have Savon Magne Jones, and so but like so as far as who's actually the best of these guys and some of the other receivers, where maybe we have to reevaluate some of those opinions and say, no, shoot, like Kasim really was maybe like the impact of those things that you don't always see just watching the games, of understanding the role he played on the offense. I don't even know what to make of, like, they rush the ball with again, the three, backs of Marcotte and Reed and Roca to relative levels of success. LaFave ends up coming in. Elijah Barnes, I think at this point I'm holding on to my stock because, I don't know what it's going to do to get rid of it at this point, but, it's dropping right now. My accountant's not happy with my current position on Elijah Barnes Island. I'm a bit, that's the extent of my stock talk I can break into right there. He throws the pick six, like on like his second ball of the game. Obviously awesome seeing Jackson McKay get the explosive play, and also just cool seeing him run in the open field. I mean, even with the pads on, it's like, yeah, that is a Olympic quality track star just running in open space, which is really just fun to watch. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to say. And defensively, yeah, I mean, a credit to the offensive line and what they were doing, but my goodness, like to be able to see now, like U of T put on that like aerial attack beat down the way they did so effectively, and then to see the rushing game beat down where they don't even need to like they're able to keep Evan Hillock essentially on ice the whole game. Like people are going to look at the stat line and again use this as a way to criticize Evan. It's like, well, why would they not be handing the ball off when they can run the ball this well? Like what do you want them to do? Like why not just so it's like this defense is in shambles. The offense is in shambles with the quarterback situation right now. I don't know what to say. I mean, next game.
Yeah, I the one thing that we were kind of hoping for, or not even hoping for, but the one bright spot that we kind of been seeing from this Carleton squad was, hey, the run game seems to be doing something, and that's what really helped carry them in that game against Waterloo last week. But when you got a Western squad that can shut that down, and what I will say, I am really starting to like Jude Buchanan as that middle linebacker for Western. I think he's playing better and better. The one thing that I want him to change focus on, whatever you want to say, he does a phenomenal job of coming downhill and meeting a running back in the hole. But where a Riley McLeod would meet that guy, sure-handed tackle, and a lot of times push that running back into the backfield, there was a couple of times here, and it more so shout out to Joey Marquette and Keyshawn Reed and Ethan Roca, but Jude makes contact and he tries to wrap a guy up, and then they fall forward, so they still gain a couple of yards. But at that point, I'm really nitpicking on what a great linebacker play that I've been seeing here. So I liked what I saw there, but I did also see. We've been talking about how great that Paul Gleason defense is with moving guys around. In this particular game, at least for a few of the times that I could actually see the linebackers, Elliot Blake for a lot of the game plays that Sam linebacker spot, and they put Luca Farencio. I'm so sorry, I butchered that name.
Farinaccio.
Thank you. But they put him at will, and so now you've got Farinaccio and Buchanan as your two like hardcore run stoppers in there with Elliot Blake, who's hitting as hard as a linebacker, but showcases that speed that he has playing DB, and then that Sam position to go after some guys. So the pieces can be constantly fluid in this Western defense, and you've got guys at every level here. It was exciting to see from that standpoint, but once again, you get guys in there that are willing to shut down the run and can shut down the run. I didn't see the best game from Elijah Barnes. Tristan Lefebvre comes in. They kind of split the reps entirely, and you and I both have voiced how much we dislike having something like that. But I mean, here's a question for you, and I know I'm kind of jumping ahead here a little bit, but in the U of T game, Scott Burnett throws 5 interceptions. So, in your opinion here, Zach, would you rather have a quarterback stay in for that entire time, even though he's struggling in that regard? And that's not all Scott Barnett's fault, those interceptions, but just for the sake of the argument, have him stay in there and throw those interceptions? Or do you do this and say, okay, Elijah Barnes is clearly struggling here. He's thrown a couple of interceptions. Let's put Lefebvre in, somebody who's been tried and tested a few years ago, and allow him to try to spin things. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
Well, we were informed that coming out of camp, Carleton really didn't know who they had in their quarterback or who was the number one, the surefire number one. And Tristan was the guy they went to first. And then they made the switch, which made sense from the standpoint of, well, again, for me being like, oh, like even if it was that close, how do you not give the tie to the guy that was just dominating last year? But put all that aside, they go to Tristan. It's not going well. So, hey, you know what? Let's try the other guy. Whereas with the Barnett situation, we obviously saw good things from O'Donohue last year, with Barnett being injured and seemingly coming out of camp, O'Donohue in that position. But clearly, with the success that Barnett's had in the early throws of the season, it's his position as the starting quarterback. There's no question about it. So, in some ways, I'm saying all that to say, even if O'Donohue came into that Queens game, it's still just a different mechanism entirely. Because in this one, it's like, dang, like, all right, Elijah's maybe regressing a little bit, or maybe it's a little bit of that, maybe he overperformed a little bit in that first season when teams didn't really get a chance to see him. I'm partly just wanting at this point, I want to see Zach George going at quarterback because there was a moment where he went in that looked really good. So I think it's a bit of an apples and oranges or what have you, mixed metaphor, because for Carleton, they clearly don't know who their quarterback is. And for U of T, I wouldn't have hated it if they went to O'Donohue, but it wouldn't have been for the same reasons. Does that seem fair?
Yeah, 100%.
Tom, again, we're looking at this. I don't know too much to say elsewise on this one. I mean, really defensively, I love the take that you said about how Coach Gleason's getting to play with a lot of these new tools and they're settling in. And I loved a few of the plays we saw from Buchanan and Elliott Blake. And in some ways, it's a scary proposition to think that Western is looking so strong offensively right now. I still do think though that like the same way we started kind of asterisk a few things with Laurier of like, all right, the defense is still incredible having lost Dollywall and Jackson Stebbing goes down and you still have this depth. They're like, okay, let's not make, think about necessarily the week to week thought of these teams. We're thinking like the month, 2 month, long term of this team. But I say all that and saying that defensively, it just feels like Western is only going to get better and better. And for them, they come off of this game getting a bye to not only make sure that they're healthy, but make sure that these guys that have been playing in a few new positions and Gleason still, as you alluded to, getting to work his guys in at different spots, try things out, will be that much more stronger when they return for homecoming, I believe, the week after against your Marauders. And for Carleton, they're taking their show on the road against the York Lions team coming off the bye who desperately needed it, which, we'll save our commentary for the week 5 preview pod. But I think especially coming off the bye, that might be the game that we finally see York offensively do the things that we've been expecting to. But we might put an asterisk next to it because we might say, well, yeah, you did it, but it was Carleton you did it to. Sorry, final thoughts, Tom, anything there? I kind of jumped to the ending. Anything lasting about these two clubs?
I
Big sigh.
Yeah, a big sigh for Carleton for sure. The thing that I'm most thinking about here is that it's a shame because you and I have really we've seen now how good those Carleton receivers are. And I think the world of Tristan Reddy and Frederick Hatchie really seems to be having a big, excuse me, a big potential here. And they're just not being able to get ball to consistently here. So I feel for those guys certainly, but this is Western domination. This was, even if Carleton was playing to the potential that we thought, I don't really think that this would be all that much different.
I'm right with you. Well, let's take our talents to the province's capital, where UofT was hosting the Queens Golden Gales, and Queens came out on top big time to the tune of 44-6. Tom, I think worth saying early in this game, Toronto was connecting on some of the things that we've been seeing them be really effective with early on. We saw a couple RPO quick screen looks from them, which was really exciting because those were those things that we were kind of calling for to say, okay, against a team in Queens that certainly defensively won't let you be as comfortable as you've been. What's that next look? And I think we saw a bit of that come to fruition. And all the while, though the game quickly got, more and more out of hand, not completely abandoning the run game. Again, offensively, the day was a bit more barren than what UofT has been doing so far this year, but recognizing that again, like if they do, and at this point, the record is going to be a tough thing to play back from, with it hitting the midway part of the season, but still some things for UofT that frankly early on, I was like, okay, I do like that you're still able to, and even defensively against this Queens team that we'll talk about. And the totality of the game, the numbers are very much slanted, granted. But in a game coming into it where I think we were very realistic of recognizing that as exciting as UofT's been and as close to a 3-0 record they could have been standing at coming into this game, and then maybe people would be saying, oh, 3-0 versus 1-2 and the 3-0 teams at home, it's like whatever. It's like no guys, like we know Queens is better, they showcased it, but I still liked some of those things, especially early on from UofT against a game in a game that they were outmatched.
Yeah, I like the fact that U of T was moving the ball down the field. And once again, it's not what I like the most about how U of T in that passing game has really been doing their thing and exploding out is that it's not necessarily huge throws down the field, but it's simple crossing routes. It's getting the ball to their guys. It's methodically going down the field from that standpoint. And that's what they were doing again. And albeit, yes, Scott Barnett's day, 19 for 32, 213 yards, no touchdowns, and 5 interceptions. It's not a great stat day. I get that. But if you actually watch this game, you can see he's finding his guys. I mean, Jake Oseen has 11 catches for 112 yards. Chris Joseph, 5 catches for 67. Certainly a slow day for him, but like they're methodical. Both of them, 112 and his long was 25. And Chris Joseph, 67, his long was 32. So yes, there was a couple of big ones where they sprinted off, but a lot of the time the game plan there is just to go down the field and be methodical. Now, when you look at the rushing stats, you're like, oh, Jack Nairo's 11 attempts for 26 yards. Like, what's going on there? That's a Queens front seven that's one of the best in the league and certainly in the country. Like, that's really just a testament to not just Justin Pace, but the guys up front. I am continually more and more impressed with the work of Eric Johnston, and Oliver Jackson, and Stephen Capene. Like those guys really seem to be doing some great work on that defensive front, even though for the most part they're playing a lot of 30 front and they're still being able to consistently stop the run. So credit to this Queens defense and their front seven because they are one of if one of the best defenses that we have in the conference period, but I still liked a lot of pieces that I saw from UofT.
Well, and I think if Queens can be just like completely in their game plan and not be made uncomfortable by the other side, like they're a defense that you're just not going to be able to like they will shut you down. And as you said, still getting some of those crossing balls early on to those guys like Joseph and like Oseen was really positive to see. Maybe having UofT a bit on, having Queens maybe playing a bit on their heels, making sure they're not getting burnt. But just exactly like you said, when they're so solid in the front seven, the way they are, that's just like, hey, look, we'll rally down to the ball. We'll make sure. I mean, at the end of the 5 interceptions, I mean, we'll talk about the day the secondary guys had. But when Queens on this day could just still look UofT in the eye and say, okay, yeah, you'll get a couple of the things that you do best, but it's just still not going to be good enough. And I love that, again, that UofT said, okay, we're going to have to try to run the ball a little bit. But Queens, it's not like it was, the way that Waterloo had to really sell out to slow down the passing attack, and that box became much more empty, and we were able to see Scott Barnett rush the ball a bit more. And last week with York having to do similar things, timely blitzes, but again, really trying to slow down the pass first. And we saw Nairos have a really good game on the ground. The fact that Queens can just stare at them dead in the eye and say, no, we're not going to blink. We're just going to play straight up. And whether we bring pressure or not, and it felt like a pretty quiet day in terms of any extra guys that were going, they're still able to get Barnett uncomfortable. They're still able to slow down the rushing attack. It's a Queens team that defensively is, to no surprise, is playing as effective as they are. But it's getting that territory of saying, we've seen you go up against the top of the conference. You nearly did it against Western and the Laurier game. Again, the score is a bit more slanted than we thought of that matchup. And so much of it starts with that defense. But offensively, though, Still seeing some really nice things. Kasari with the 183 on the ground, the 2 touchdowns. But Nathan Falcone, dude. I mean, the 4 receptions, 74 yards, the 3 touchdowns, that one near the end of the first half where he catches it right at the front cone and is able to contort his body in. Like, really special day we're seeing the whole depth and the cast of characters that they have. Like, to me, Vreekin, again, a day that doesn't knock your socks off, but just like we talked about with the Hillock commentary, just doing the things that need to be made to win the game. And, seemingly without a hitch, this offense is starting to look really good and starting to take a little shape with Vreekin being that kind of key figure. Did you feel like he had a better game than what you saw against Laurier? Because I know there was still some moments that we were like, got to tighten the screws up a little bit at times. Did you feel like you got a little more of that this week from Vreekin?
Yes, in certain cases, but I'm still not 100% satisfied with this. And purely because I hold Alex Vreekin as one of the top quarterbacks in this league and by that form in the country here. And I'm not seeing that potential fully be realized. There's certain throws that he makes where you go, "Oh, wow, yes. Okay, this is where you are that impressive dude, and that's where this is happening." But even on the lone interception that he throws, like it purely sails on him. It goes right into the hands of the UOT defender. And like, I just want to see more. And I know I'm being selfish here, or I'm expecting a lot, but I think he has earned the fact for us to hold him at a high pedestal and for us to really demand the best out of him because he showcased at times that he can be one of the best guys. But he just, for whatever reason, I haven't seen a full game out of him as of yet. And for like 90% of the teams in the OUA, your defense and the work of your special teams is good enough to get you into those areas and play good enough games offensively, and away you go. But against the Lauriers and the Westerns of the world, this is where that really gets exposed. And that's if you can't consistently move the ball down the field and be smart with the football and to showcase your full potential, there's other teams who can. So I want to see more from Vreekin. I want to see more of that outstanding capability that I know he has.
And I think that's fair because I think as you laid it out, like the expectation calls for it in terms of just like what they can do and what we know that they can do with who they have and just how they're set up for success this year. Again, looking at those, well, it's actually by no means a minuscule thing by any means, but thinking about key figures that we weren't seeing who are back in, I think a major thing to note. And I had to double check that it hadn't been since week 1 that we saw Matt Driver punting the ball for Queens. And Tyler Mullen, he's an outstanding place kicker doing their kickoff duties as well. And by all accounts, I guess Tayshaun Jackson, had the return touchdown, but I don't really think that's on Tyler Mullen. But knowing that they got a guy in Driver who can just flip the field so effectively, like the type of leg that I think probably like would be maybe the closest in strength to come to someone like Horvat, and we know how good he is. If we're looking at, as you were alluding to, sort of to be like so solid in all 3 phases of the game, to be able to compete with those Westerns and those Queens things, very much was pleased from a Queens perspective seeing him return in terms of what this team can look like at their very best. And on special teams as well, obviously Ian St. Arnaud with the big play for them in the return game, which is fascinating because I feel like when he had those major plays last year, those were coming off of the missed field goals. And it feels like they actually don't always use them returning kicks or punts, I should say. Really nice play for him. We know how explosive he is in the open field, and when he has a full head of steam in front of him, he's darn near impossible to catch. What else, Tom, from this game? Again, it was nice seeing UofT keep it close early, seeing some positive things, but it kind of played out as we would have expected.
Yeah, I love the fact that you brought up Matt Driver because he's definitely somebody that I wanted to highlight. It's tough because these stats are very it's dependent on where he actually is kicking from and everything, but 4 punts and 3 of them are inside the 20. That's a pretty outstanding return for that from that case, as long as 51 there. So like to see Matt Driver back in kicking for these Queens Golden Gales once again. What Charlie Taggart's been doing with that special teams with Queens has been nothing short of amazing ever since he got there. Like there's a marked improvement across the board. So love to see that. Our guy in pace and doing his thing. And I have to say, I've said this before kind of jokingly, but I'm going to say it again. if Ashton Miller Melanson is covering your receiver, even if he looks open, he is
Don't
not
throw it.
open. Stop throwing towards him. He should be bored out of his skull because he's not doing anything on the field because you are continuously not throwing the ball at him. Stop doing it. He finishes with 2 interceptions on the day for exactly that reason. But no, this is more so a Queen's dominant showcase on almost all three facets rather than like a huge UofT loss, even after you see everything that's in here. I'm really excited about the potential of this Queen's team, and they just continue to get better and better. Of course, they had their two big teams early on in the season, but if you can start peaking at the right moment, which is in the back half of the season, man, this is. I don't think there's a team out there that's going to say, "Oh, great, we get to play Queens in the playoffs."
I 100% agree with you. And for Queens, I think they'll just be able to keep rolling. We liked what Waterloo's showing defensively, but they're going to take their show on the road against the Warriors next week. For UofT, they stay home playing host to the Windsor Lancers, a matchup that I think will be fascinating to set up, but we'll get into that one later on because let's go to the end of the 401 under the shadows of the Golden Arches, a little place known as Little Rock, Arkansas. With the bluest of blue collars, the goldest of gold swagger, under the tutelage, the guidance, the mentorship of JP the Don Cercelli. The Windsor Lancers played host to your McMaster Marauders, Tom, and came away with a 29-13 win. Tom, I mean, first of all, hey, I always forget that Windsor does that light show on all the scores. Shout out to y'all, Windsor. And actually, let me go. I made a note to say this in the Carleton game. Put aside what was going on the field. I love that Carleton's using a sideline reporter, just bringing more involvement. Obviously, we love the two-man booth that they have up there. So from that standpoint, I wanted to say that. Also from the UofT game, I really like the coverage was really good. The broadcasters, it sounded good. They were sharp. They were on their P's and Q's. Was really happy with that. And obviously, with Mr. Hedges calling up these Windsor games, you're in great hands. This was a game where, obviously, by our tiers, we had Windsor ahead of Mac. Windsor off, with the rough start to the season with the Laurier game, then Guelph coming in to pick up that win. And Mac, obviously, the offense has been really difficult for them. Similarly, we talked with Guelph in Ottawa coming out of this game. Obviously, just like Ottawa won, Windsor did win the game. But I'm like, okay, if there was any part of me that was like, hey, we really like both defenses, Luke Thalman, we know that he's shown the talent. We're still waiting for a bit more of that offense, but Queens, we're just seeing more and more is perhaps as good a defense as there is. So maybe we want to caveat some of that. It's very clear Windsor is the better football team. And early on in this game, Mac had a nice drive in the third quarter, getting the major, but pretty thoroughly. Like the score is almost a little tighter than I felt like was really reflected in the totality of this game, especially in the first half. And it was really nice to see Windsor, though we still want to, I think, see some more things offensively and clean some stuff up. A really solid win for them at home.
Yeah, certainly. I think obviously this is Windsor's first win of the season, and they're certainly fighting for it. But I saw a lot of really great things. Finally seeing Andrew Delaney go off and start to match that a little bit. He finishes with 101 yards, including that big 25-yard touchdown run near the end of the game to really seal that one where he bounces off like 3 or 4 Marauder defenders to get into the end zone. Tyreek Quason, to me, was really impressive. Two rushing attempts for 60 yards and another 2 catches for 22 yards, sure, but he's got a lot of great pieces there that I think accents the rest of this Windsor offense in that same way of, once again, we got a little bit of a word on Liam Talbot that you can get into as well, but in that same vein of that Talbot-esque jack of all trades, you have Tyreek Quason that's kind of showcasing a little bit of that as well to add another layer to this dynamic offense. So certainly a lot of things to be happy about on the Windsor side. On the McMaster side, and we can dive into this obviously, honestly, pretty happy with the defense as a whole. I think once again, Windsor did move the ball a lot on them, but a very much bend but don't break kind of mentality here for the most part. Obviously, once again, the same thing that we've been saying, if that offense can't continuously hold the ball for longer drives and the defense has to just keep going out there, it's only a matter of time before something's can kind of happen from that regard. But I still like this McMaster defense. I still like what Coach Grandy is doing. It's just that offense needs work.
No, most definitely. I did love, I was very much thinking about you watching the game and the 4 times seeing Aiden Nemeth get the ball. And, again,
Mm.
in that same way that we talk about, Tuioti and we talk about Basiligo, some of these other teams and Dankers. I like that they were getting him the ball. Everett Reed, 6 receptions. I certainly feel like is the most we've seen him get active in it. Quiet game for Jackson Taylor, but we know that he's ready to explode and to pop off. And, kind of similarly, still able to keep the ground game alive, but a lot of it being Thalman and capping off that third quarter drive, rushing it in himself. Again, really tough kid, really, really liking what we're seeing. The stat line's not great, but I still think that it's looking into next year that you have to realize what is exciting about this MAC team right now, and like the idea of Jackson Taylor going to his third year, his East West year with Thalman with an extra year under his belt, the O line continuing to improve, and a defense under Grandy that's continuing to show really really positive things. I want to go back to the Windsor thing quickly though. I mean, you mentioned Quayson's name, and the thing that I don't think I caught on their first couple games. Maybe I was had the volume on another screen, but not just the transfer from Laurier, but also track guy. So really exciting when we see him in the open space, see the athleticism, and really nice seeing Mateo Triffin get involved again. Seeing this cast of characters where whether you want to say that quieter game for Kareem Cotton than what we've seen, but maybe top talent. You say, is he a receiver one? We know Colby Ginn has the familiarity in the system, but at the end of the day, you put all that aside and you say, well, on a day like today, as you highlighted, Delaney can have that big game for them. Mambo still 12 carries, the bulk of the touches for them, 54 yards, doing his part. Like a team that's still staying in there, all the while hoping. Because I don't know the full status of Talbot, Liam Talbot, still nursing the injury that took him out last year is a bit of my understanding on that. But just realizing that there's still some really nice things, recognizing that it's a weaker opponent. But hey, you were in a tough game against Guelph, some really positive things against Laurier. For a team that we saw a lot of moving parts and having to fill guys in some key spots, just really liking what we're seeing from Windsor so far. Again, next week we'll have a little more of a conversation in terms of just like where they're ultimately slotted in. But with for what it is, a really positive day. Defensively, Tom, with that max squad though against them, it still comes down to that linebacking core to me, and just what they've been doing so consistently. That three-headed beast of Lavers, Shields, and Tony Sostanovic. It's again, as much as Mac on the whole, when you just look at the standings, you look at the record, so on and so forth. It might surprise folks. That's a linebacking core that like you'll put up with some of the better linebacking cores in the province. I mean, when you get past, obviously those top, Queens and the Lauriers and Ottawa, they're not far away from that right now. And it's clearly like proving week in, week out from the 3 games, probably for the 4 games that we've seen from this team so far.
Well, I mean, pretty consistently here, and this game's no uh it proves it. Sorry, words. The top three tacklers on this team in this game are all three linebackers. Aaron Lavers, 7.5 tackles, a sack. Isaiah Shields with 7 total tackles, and Sostanovic with 5 total tackles. Like, it just goes to show that the heart of that team is that linebacking core. And I still think I like them a lot. I think that they showcase a lot of potential there with what they're doing. And obviously Brady Lister, incredible. We gave him the special teams player of the week, but like the fact that he had to kick the ball 5 times on field goals just kind of showcases once again that is a bend but don't break kind of defense, and that's a defense that's going to continually help keep this team in the game against the majority of the opponents that you're going to be facing. So, man, like if this offense can figure things out, like it's not necessarily just a bygone season for McMaster. Like there's still some possibilities in here, but you're coming up against some pretty damn good opponents pretty soon here, and you're gonna have to really flip things around if you want something. But like you've got the early touchdown in the books in the first quarter, and then Windsor doesn't score another touchdown until the literal last points on the board in the fourth quarter. So there's a possibility there, and let's not forget, for as much as that McMaster offense struggled, at the end of the third quarter, it's 13-19. Like it's pretty close in that. So I still like this McMaster defense a lot. The thing, obviously, in that third quarter when they go up and they score a touchdown, obviously that's the place to really focus on. But to me, the one that I like is the second quarter I believe it's at near the beginning of the second quarter or so, where McMaster puts on a pretty good drive, and at bare minimum they flip the field. I think that might have been when no, it was when Horvat kicks the field goal to get the first points of the game. But 15 plays, 83 yards in 7 minutes. That's really where I see the strength of, or the possibility of what this offense can be, because the majority of that is running the ball a little bit with Micah Duchesne and Braden Kelly. But after you're doing quick passes to your guys down the field, it's quick speed outs, it's quick hooks, where it's just a rock and throw essentially for Luke Thalman. And that's where I see a lot of great capabilities here. Thalman's still not afraid to throw a deep ball. He did that a few times here, didn't get a chance to connect. But between a deep ball threat that's there, especially with a Jackson Taylor who can go off at any time, and a decent enough run game to just complement things, I think that's really where I want to see this McMaster offense come from. Like this idea of just allowing guys, allowing your receivers to try to beat a coverage across or whatever. I like the idea a little bit more of just taking the quick stuff, being methodical, even in the passing game, to help set up the run in that regard. And that's what you saw in that second quarter that led to points. And I think that's a lot of what you saw to set up their touchdown at the end of that third quarter as well. So pieces in place. I'm the alumni being optimistic as I can, obviously, but like you mentioned, while this year is probably going to be a rough year for the Marauders, I do like what the future holds.
And I think those quick game balls that you were highlighting were also where we were seeing not a lot, but some success in them moving the ball against Queens going back 2 weeks ago. The bend but don't break aspect of the defense, I think, is a fair point. I think there's a flip side of that coin to also look at a Nick Domofsky run Windsor offense to say, okay, part of what we need to see from you is we got to start finishing drives with sixes and not threes. I'm sure at no point it's in there thought that like, wow, well, when you got Litzner back there, like we'll always come away with points. So maybe like deep down, and I'm sure that's not at hand. It's a privilege having someone who will bail you out if those drives stall. I think that's the big thing to see from this offense. We're seeing them move the ball. It's kind of similar with Guelph a little bit, able to move the ball in spurts, and then it just stalls at those key points. So what is it you need to develop? For Windsor, I think they're healthier offensively than no, it's the Liam Talbot piece. That might be again much like whether it's Donovan Malloy for Guelph, it might just be that simple of just someone who can bring it all together. So hoping that he gets back in there and just to see what this can become, because I do think though our tier for Windsor is probably going to remain the same ultimately. I think similarly with Mac, though they're at different stages right now, I think just the same way that we talk with Mac of saying, oh, but next year could be really exciting. I think with Windsor, we're starting to see some really nice things. And though next year, I would imagine this probably is the last year where we have, Istvan Asibo-Dadzi for them. Robert Springer might be his last year, Liam Hoskins. So a lot of turnover there. But to see the, I think now third year defensive lineman in Ahmad Taylor have clearly his breakout game of 3.5 sacks, another, transplant from the States coming just across the border from Michigan. Hey, we didn't know who Claudia Mooson was until we knew who Claudia Mooson was. So all the way of saying that maybe all of a sudden Ahmad Taylor has just become that guy for them. Who knows? I don't expect 3.5 sacks a game for him, but just, with the people they got calling him up, the players that they're fitting in there, I just looking past the record a little bit now, I still really like what we're seeing in the early stages from this Windsor team as well. Final thoughts, Tom, either about the matchup in itself or these teams in general from week 4?
Yeah, talking about both quarterbacks to start with Domofsky, still not really seeing his capabilities as of yet. 16 for 28, 172 yards, 1 touchdown, and no picks. I mean, I wouldn't exactly call that a phenomenal day from him, especially where we've seen what he can do in certain cases here. So would love to see him get a little bit more established there. And once again, a shout out to the McMaster defense, even in that secondary, guys like Sean Underhill and Zach Payne really doing their thing from that side of things, which is nice to see. But Luke Thalman, I think, has a ton of potential, but he is a very young quarterback. And the thing that really drives that home for me is that while he did have a decent enough game on the ground, he rushes for 69 yards with a long of 18 and that touchdown, too many times I saw him taking off where he's either taking off before he really needs to, or he makes the decision that he's going to take off, and then immediately his eyes go from looking downfield to down.
It's the Nick Orr commentary.
It's the same Nick Orr kind of commentary, and that idea of even when if you're a quarterback, even when you have to scramble, the great ones are looking down the field right up until they pass that line of scrimmage. And even then, sometimes there's a quick pump fake to try to get a defender to jump off sides. Or jump away while you're taking off and running. I just think that there needs to be a little bit more of that. Ahmad Taylor deserves all the credit in the world. He had a fantastic game, but there's a couple of times there where, there's a blitz that's coming off the edge that actually gets picked up really well by, I can't remember if it was Micah Duchesne or if it was Braden Kelly, but just that extra pressure causes Thalman to take off, and he tries to go out and around where the protection was, essentially pushing the blocker directly into where he's going, and then Ahmad Taylor, being the athlete that he is, chases him down and sacks him, rather than, if you do have to take off, try to weave through where the blocks are and find the gap and away you go. There's just, I don't know. There's something more that I want here. You and I saw some pieces, especially in that York game, the things that we really liked. And it's not that he hasn't been playing well since then. Like, we've seen some stuff, but there needs to be more development from him in just as a whole.
Most definitely. And I think for both these teams, seeing that growth happen at the quarterback position throughout the year is going to give us a lot more indication of what to expect for the next year. And then with Domofsky, as you said, there were a few times where I remember him missing Kareem Cotton on a ball that would have been a nice big gainer for them, getting them deeper into the MAC territory. I think, again, just for like, what does this season mean for different teams? For these two teams, those are the things we're keeping our eyes on: the offensive side of the ball, the development of some of these younger players, and how it's going to look for Windsor. That defense that has been very strong so far is going to get one of their bigger tests going into that UofT offense next week to see how they can slow down that passing attack. And for MAC, as we said, they are hosting the At the 55 Bowl next week. So we will be live and direct from Ron Joyce doing the pregame there. And that's going to be really exciting. We'll tell you all about that if you forgot from last year when we set up week 5. But Tom, that is a conclusion to the week 4 action. We're going to now take you around the league, looking at the other 3 USports conferences. Before we do that, Tom's going to give us a little story time from his time in UBC. But even before we do that, Tom, I mean, I know next week we're going to do the midseason check-in. I have the OUA standings in front of me. And in some ways, there are things where it's like, that makes sense. And then there's parts to it where I'm just like, maybe it's just because a lot of teams have still only played the 3 games. Some have had the 4. But you got Western 4-0, Laurier 4-0, Ottawa 3-1, York 2-1, Queens 2-2, Carleton 1-2, Windsor 1-2, Waterloo 1-3, Toronto 1-3, Guelph 1-3, McMaster 0-3. I don't know why it looks weird. It looks weird for a lot of reasons. Again, we'll talk next week about like the full midseason check-in, but I think this maybe is reflective of the competition that we expected to see this year in the OUA, and the fact that Western and Laurier are still sort of lording above everyone else. But anyways, it caught my eye. I wanted to mention it. But Tom, take us through your trip out to the left coast and your adventures with the UBC Thunderbirds.
It was an outstanding time that I had out there. First and foremost, I was there for my actual job to do work, but I did get a chance to sneak away at times on the Friday in particular and speak to the legendary coach Blake Nill. Have a one-on-one conversation with him about his entire career, both as a player and as a coach, from his time out in the AUS, coming back to Calgary, and then obviously going into UBC, and the success that he's seen at every different level there was really just amazing to be able to talk about. And you should be able to hear it on the podcast that comes next week, but there's legitimately 2 or 3 times when we're talking where he is choking up, has tears in his eyes because of how emotional he is thinking about those previous teams and how proud he was of those guys, both the coaches and the players, and how well they were doing. It was a really special thing, even for me, to just get a chance to see. That every quality head coach cares about his team and his players, but to physically see it, just asking a few questions and having him walk down memory lane was something that was pretty powerful. But the game itself, so once again, like we mentioned, I was going out there to watch the game, and then I get a call and I get an opportunity. Hey, Tom, do you want to call the game for 620 CKRM Saskatchewan radio? I go, hell yeah. And shout out to Brandon McGuire there. He was a phenomenal play-by-play guy. He and I worked really well together. And Nick Partridge, his uncle, who was our spotter for us as well. It was an electric atmosphere. Regina does win this game 37-20, but after a dominating first half where it's 17-6, or sorry, 20-6 for Regina, UBC storms back, and by the end of the third quarter, it's 23-20. And actually, right at the start of the fourth quarter, UBC just gets a turnover, and I'm looking around like, oh, we got a football game on our hands. Let's go. And then Regina does their thing and goes through. But it was an electric atmosphere. And not only that, I mentioned this to you. What I found out, obviously my first time being at UBC in the stadium, the press box is right in the stands. I am directly next to all of the fans that are in there. And a similar setup to Guelph where they have stands on one side and a hill on the other side. While the hill didn't have any other people, the stands themselves were rammed figuratively and literally with that, because those Regina Rams fans were also out in full force, so much so that we had a crowd mic next to us along with our headsets. We didn't need the crowd mic because the headsets, even though they're supposed to be noise canceling for everything else, were picking up the fans and how loud they were. There was actually a couple of times where UBC went offside when they were in the south end zone where those Regina Rams fans are, and they're looking around being like, we're supposed to be at home. What the hell?
Now, Tom, like on the game itself, and you set it up a lot of the key aspects to there. I mean, firstly, just from the UBC standpoint, I mean, Shamar McBean, obviously we saw at East West last year, and him pop off, and on this game, obviously a huge day for him with the 7 catches, 158, and the touchdown. Did you get a read? Because I know you got to obviously see a lot of the UBC folks and the Regina folks afterwards on what direction they're going with the quarterback room, because we start with that opening game against Manitoba where we see Drew Viotto, though, leave the game a bit banged up, show some signs of promise where it's like, this is a big dude with a big arm and he can move and he can throw off platform. It's really exciting. So then this one, Drew Angle goes 21 for 29, 297, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Did you get much of a read on what direction they're going there? Because I mean, obviously when you got a guy in McBean, a kind of CanWest all-star caliber guy in there, and someone who we're probably going to talk about come the CFL draft prep in early 2026, as well as it sounds, as we always talk about. We talked about a lot of with Carleton just a moment ago. Your quarterback kind of matters a little bit in the situation. Do you have a sense of what's happening there?
Well, so I actually spoke with Blake Nill in that podcast. We were kind of finished off that segment talking about this year and this team, and he mentioned to me Derek Engel, and he's been a backup on a couple of those teams, playing behind a Garrett Rooker, who was obviously as incredible as he was. But Drew Viotto and Derek Engel are going to be in something of a quarterback battle probably for the majority of this year, because while Derek Engel has had the experience and he showcases a lot of the stuff, one of the big issues for Drew is when you think about it, he not only had some experience in the university level playing down south, but he also spent his entire high school. He went down to a prep school down south. So this is his first Canadian football in like 7 years, 6 years, something like that. And that's a lot to come back to, especially when your first live bullets are against the CanWest defenses of the world. You're going up against the Regina Rams or the Huskies or whatever else. Like, that's a big task to really go through. And especially when you think about it, let's not forget last week with that shellacking that Saskatchewan put onto UBC. Why not try something new at quarterback? And while Derek Engel had a decent game, it really was this Regina Rams team. And Shamar goes off 7 catches for 158 yards and a touchdown. A lot of those catches, to Shamar's credit, was Derek being like, you know what? I don't really have anybody here. F it. McBean's somewhere back there. Let's just get him the ball. And he comes down with it a lot of times.
Obviously, what made Regina so special, obviously the defense and Carson Sombach, obviously still being so effective back there. The two interceptions by LaBelle and by Platt combined. But in terms of defensive efforts, you also got to talk to one of the defensive stars of this game for the UBC Thunderbirds, our guy in Kinsale Phillip, who's still just looking so tremendous in at will linebacker. But at times you were a little bit, sounded like you were a bit befuddled on how they were using him, even though he still ends up as their leading tackler.
Yeah, he first off, so incredible to see our guy Kinsale and to see him doing his thing. And I know obviously it's just purely like the age thing, like he was younger when he was playing quarterback versus now he's playing linebacker. But he's bulked up. He's a big boy. He's a big boy playing will linebacker. And it was an awesome experience because after the game, I got to speak to a friend of the show and friend of mine now, Gord Randall, who's a part of those Gridiron Nation stuff. It was so awesome getting a chance to finally connect with him in person. But Kinsale comes up to him first and foremost, and me, like the idiot I am, I brought my green at the 55 shirt out with me, so everybody thought I was a Regina Rams coach. And so Kinsale first looks at me and goes, "Hey man, what's going on?" And then he sees the logo, goes, "Oh shit, at the 55!" And got a chance to see him and talk with him. It was so awesome to catch up with him. But yeah, he is their starting will linebacker, and he is the leading tackler on the team. But at one point in the game, I believe it was near the end of the third quarter, beginning of the fourth, they decided to take him out and put it in someone else instead, just to try and switch things up on the defense. They made some other changes as well. It wasn't just that, but kind of had me scratching my head because there was a number of times where Regina was doing great work with those quick games out to the receivers and those receiver screens or the X quicks and things of that nature. And those receivers are great for Regina, making guys miss at least at the first, like the corner of the half that's out there. And a lot of the time was Kinsale Phillip coming from his will linebacker spot out of the box to make the tackle, albeit 8 or 9 yards down the field. But still, he's the guy, the sure-handed tackle. So to take him out didn't make a whole ton of sense to me. And even on the UBC side, I think that the offense that UBC is currently running is a pro style offense. Kahari Jones is your offensive coordinator. He comes from the CFL. Of course, it's going to be that, but I think he needs to make some adjustments for the guys that he has in there. You know, there's a couple of times where there's once again my dreaded play, a field out that's called. That's like a 30 or 40 yard ball that again, in the best scenarios, nets you like 4 or 5 yards and just opens up the door for a potential interception almost every time. So I think when you have the CFL caliber arm strength, if you've got a Keegan Hall, an Anton Amarud, an Arnold Desjardins, Justin Quirion, just to give somebody from all the way across the league because we're a USports Cup podcast. But if you've got that kind of arm talent, sure, call that in if you really want to. If you see a capability, if you see something, you know, you're seeing a lot of hold coverage, you want to try to get after that, fine. Anybody else, though, I wouldn't recommend doing stuff like that. And there was a few times where I saw that kind of an offense, and Derek Engels just trying to do everything he can to get past that. So certainly some things to clean up for UBC. You didn't see their best game, but they certainly roared back in the beginning of that second half. So it made it exciting.
Small sample size, but I feel like what we saw from Viato, he might be the type of guy that you trust to throw those those balls to the field that again there's sometimes just out of the playbook depending on who you have in there. Tom, you know, I want to talk about the Saskatchewan Manitoba game as well. And I want to start it off by framing it like this, which is that much like we talk about in the OUA, whether the standings give us the full picture or not, we have Regina obviously at 3-0 sitting at the top and Saskatchewan falling on the road against Manitoba 21-20, missing the potential game-winning field goal. And Manitoba similarly roaring back after Saskatchewan jumped out. To you, is it clear that the standings reflect the hierarchy of CanWest, or does part of you still think that Saskatchewan might be the team to beat? I mean, ultimately, this is the Hardy Cup we had last year and Regina won it. So, I mean, I don't know why perhaps I'm deferring to Sask. I mean, obviously just the love for Riker Frank, who had a really productive game in this one, and Daniel Weeb coming back is where a lot of that excitement comes into play. And then obviously the growth of Anton Amandrud with, of course, oh, help me out. I'm forgetting the Huskies legend who's coaching them up now.
Jason Nias.
Jason Nias. All that getting us super excited for this team. Is it to you clear that it's just Regina then Sask? Is it clear that we're getting another Battle of Saskatchewan Hardy Cup next year? Either way, how are you making sense of the top of, and again, not to even sleep on Calgary being at 2-1 as well, but we can talk about their game, the Battle of Alberta game. Who do you think is the class of CanWest right now?
I have to say it's the Regina Rams. Obviously, I watched them in person and we talk about it so often. Physically, while yes, you and I would be able to have a podcast focusing on the Canada West, and spoiler alert, we are actively looking into what that would look like for all of our Can West fans, but you get the best sense of what these teams are when you watch them in person. Film only does so much for you, especially when it's the TV version of film. You don't have like an end zone cut where you can really dissect stuff, whatever. But when I watch this Regina Rams team, I mean, first and foremost, let me read you off some stats from that UBC side. Noah Peltier, 25 for 33, 360 yards and 3 touchdowns with no picks. Marshall Erickson, 27 attempts, 196 on the ground and 1 touchdown. He was one of the most impressive running backs that I've seen, period. And then Nicholas Sirleaf, 11 catches for 158 yards and a touchdown, including one of my most favorite plays of that entire game. UBC gets them backed up. They're on their like own 3 yard line, and Noah Peltier to get the ball, take the snap, is in his own end zone. What he does, the entirety of the world and every single common sense thought in your head is going, okay, you hand the ball off here, you try to get out of the shadow of your own goalpost. If you have to kick it away, you have to kick it away, whatever. Instead, they fake it, and Peltier finds Sirleaf down the sidelines for that 62-yard gain, and now immediately they went from I'm in my own end zone to now we're in UBC territory and we're fighting for extra points. And I believe they scored a touchdown off of that drive. But the play calling that's in there, head coach Mark McConkey is also the offensive coordinator as well. So what he's been able to do and the growth that I've seen from him has been outstanding. This team is great. I mean, but even you start looking at that defense, and that's what Regina is known for, is that defense. You lose Jackson Sombach, you lose Delaney Robinson, and that's a huge from your defensive secondary. And then you get a guy like Liam Platt, who comes off the edge from his halfback position. It's not shown here, or sorry, Liam LaBelle, excuse me. He comes off from his linebacker position for a huge sack when it's UBC on the 2 yard line. It's first and goal. Sacks Engel for an 8 yard loss and pushes them back. And then the very next play picks the ball off and goes 40 yards the other way. At that point, like, I believe it's 23-20 at that time. Like, UBC, we're thinking, is going to take over the game and they're going to lead here. And then you have guys who are just ready to step up. I loved what I saw from Brandon Wong as well from that Sam linebacker position. He was all over the field, and the hits. Like, this was a Regina Rams team that every time you touched the ball, you were going to have to pay for having the audacity to hold the ball. So I don't know if I'm just swept up in Regina Rams fever or what, but to me, and I'll say this as of recording, September 14th, 2025, the Regina Rams are going to win the Hardy Cup this year.
No, I love the take. And, again, to talk, just to bring Sask back into it, you can start to play the game of like, well, as you highlighted, UBC's right on the door of maybe flipping the script of this game. We saw what UBC, how that matchup was against Saskatchewan a week prior. But then, of course, we see then Saskatchewan pick up their first loss of the season against a Manitoba team that certainly has been playing above their record so far this season. And so I don't really know what to make of it, but I think, maybe if we get to that point to make it interesting, I'll just sit on the other side of the pick because I don't think it's obviously, it's a great Saskatchewan team nonetheless. And I don't really think all that much less of them, just like even falling in this one, because I do think this is a Manitoba team that, especially when that run game gets going with that major offensive line, can really be so scary. Because Jackson Tuchinski, we know that one of the things that makes him so great is when he's getting outside the pocket and being able to create things with his feet. And he was 24 for 32, 258, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. You don't love that. But Braden Stubbs adds in 107 on the ground. Tuchinski at the 65. I feel like that offense is starting to come together a little bit. But I still want to look over to the Husky side of things, and I just think of this like just the big three of Ammanrud, Frank, and Weeb, and the veteran presence of those guys for then some of these other receivers and runners who are able to then add into the mix as well is just really impressive. But what's your read coming off of this Bison's win at home? Obviously, unfortunate Lucas Scott, 2 for 3, and the one miss is the one at the end. But those are the breaks. To me, I see this more of Manitoba finally, just doing what we can expect of them this year, rather than saying, "Oh, was Saskatchewan not as good as we saw in the last 2 weeks?"
Well, I think it's honestly it's got to be a bit of both because when you look at this game, you have to remember it's 17-0 for Saskatchewan going into the second half here, and then Manitoba outscores them 21-3 in that back half. They don't score a single other touchdown in that regard. And when you look at how dominant that Saskatchewan looked, it's even in the first quarter, they come down, they drive the length of the field, and they settle with a field goal. On the very next drive, Tuchinski finds his receiver. I can't remember who it is off the top of my head. And Seth Hundeby lays the boom. One of the biggest hits that I've seen, forces the fumble. Sask takes over at the Manitoba 40-yard line. 5 plays later, they're in the end zone. It's 10-0, and Manitoba has had the ball twice on offense. So when Saskatchewan's playing at the very highest of the levels, there's damn near nobody else that does it as well as they do, and especially with all those names that you had. One thing that I will say, I don't think that Rhett Varva dressed in this game. I think he was dealing with an injury, so that's another huge piece from that receiving core that's off. The thing that I like the most about this SAS team, though, is once again, I've highlighted this previously, but Anton Ammanrud still with no interceptions because he's being smart with the football. Did have a couple of times, or at least one time last week, where you did throw it into double coverage, but that's, just shaking off. He's still a gunslinger at heart and shaking it off. But smarter with the football, more methodical here. And Riker Frank, once again, a phenomenal running back. He also gets 4 catches for 18 yards in the air as well. So I like the Saskatchewan team a lot, but the adjustments that were made in halftime for this Manitoba team, to see Jackson Tuchinski go off, like you mentioned, Nathan Udon, 12 catches for 158 yards and a touchdown for these Bisons as well. I think we're just seeing the very bare minimum of what this Manitoba team can be, and they're continually having to grow and really succeed here. But I still think that no matter what, the Hardy Cup is going to go through Saskatchewan with the 2 teams that are playing in there. It's just, well, the last thing that I'll say, and I know I'm jumping ahead here, I'm all over the place because I'm a CanWest lunatic now, apparently, is that next week is Regina versus Saskatchewan.
No, that's going to be major to finally get the Battle of Sask. And again, as far as recontextualization, because in the Battle of Alberta, to now bring in the final game that we had here, we're seeing from a team in Calgary where, as far as reevaluating things we've seen in previous weeks, I mean, everything with that you set out about Regina so far this year, it's like, well, dang, that first game for Calgary, despite the loss in overtime, a really good showing for the offense with David Jordan, what he was doing in that one. And then to see in this game, they pick up the win against Alberta. They pick up the win against Alberta, where to have the final score. Sorry, I moved off the wrong page. But do you got in front of you there, Tom? For some reason,
23-19.
Perfect. You got the 23-19. So we've seen David Jordan earlier in the season have a really nice outing, the 3 touchdowns against the Regina defense that, as you're saying, is one of the best we might have. And then in this game, though, to really see it come on the back of the running game, and Eri Olarubofin really having a big game with 155 on the 17 carries, where, yes, it gets into that territory of, it can get late quick, but when there's clearly, as far as the hierarchy of CanWest, as much as you were excited to see maybe U of A make that leap and knock somebody out one way or the other, it looks like Calgary can at least say, hey, look, even if we're losing a couple heartbreakers or some tight games here and there, they've shown the potential to be able to play with pretty much everyone they've had to go up against so far. And the 2-1 record shows it. And an overtime loss against the team that, as we're saying, not just the Hardy Cup champs, but possibly the favorite to repeat this year. So when you add that into the mix, I still feel like I would have Sask above them. And man, Manitoba, I know they picked up the loss last week against Calgary, Calgary, but they were right there on the doorstep. This Calgary team, I feel like, is very much, despite some of the concerns with, as you mentioned, with the roster being kind of strange of like either like was it all fourth years or first years, and what we saw
Mhm.
last year being a little bit of a tough start for them in the Ryan Sheehan era. Really like what they're seeing, and offensively being able to show that they can do it on the ground as well as in the air.
Yeah, and one of the things I like the most about this Calgary team is the fact that there is seemingly no quit on this team. Let's not forget, to tie things up with Regina, they have to go down the field, score a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion, and then kick a field goal through the end zone to tie it up in the most Canadian ending to a game possible here. Albeit, yes, they lose that one, but once again, here, Alberta scores. It's 19-16 with 2 minutes and 39 seconds left in the game. And Calgary drives the length of the field and goes 8 plays, 84 yards in 2 minutes to make it 23-19. And there's no waiver there, there's no issues. And once again, like we mentioned, half the team's fourth years, half the team's first year. So you have a good mix of everybody going, including quarterback David Jordan. But the fourth years that are on this team very clearly have a dominating presence here to showcase, hey guys, like, I know we're in a lot of tight games, but let's remain calm. We can still do this. And the poise to continually go down the field and to score touchdowns when it matters most ultimately is what's almost the most important aspect here. And Calgary's shown that they can do that a couple of times. Alberta, while struggled at times, still seeing some positives here and seeing some growth from those Golden Bears. So I am excited about that. But like you mentioned, Calgary's 2-1 and they've looked pretty good.
One, I think we're still seeing positive things from Eli Hetlinger. I'm curious of how they're using Oshanubi. I would have thought that he would be a little more, whether he's the primary back. I would have thought we're seeing a little more from him, but still an Alberta team that I think we can look past the record and say it's a really competitive CanWest this year. And, they're showing that growth, those things that you were able to sort of highlight last year, or probably before the season, getting to visit their camp. Tom, what else, just as far as the weekend of CanWest football, we kind of went through it a little bit different than we would our OUA breakdown, but just any other thoughts from your time out at UBC or watching any of the other games that we were talking about?
One of the things that I was the happiest about, and you and I have had some gripes about something similar in the past, is while yes, this ended up being a tight game kind of throughout, there were at times between Regina and UBC where the scores kind of got a little bit lopsided, especially at halftime where it's 17-3, I believe. Nobody from those stands left. Those stands remain packed and loud from quarter 1 to quarter 4 up until Regina's final touchdown to really put the game out of reach. And only then you saw a few students start to leave, but the majority of the stadium still remained packed. So if that's a sample of what CanWest fans are like, I am all here for it. It can be difficult at times because a lot of the times, as we see in the OUA, the camera is on the side of where the majority of the fans are. And so while Manitoba plays where the Winnipeg Blue Bombers play, and they're never going to sell that out, at least regularly, I imagine the majority of those fans are probably on the side where the camera is. And so they've got decent showouts there. But I know for a fact Saskatchewan loves their football. The Huskies and the Rams should have a great showcase for this Battle of Saskatchewan that if it was a little bit closer and didn't cost so much, maybe we'd go to it.
Yeah, that would have been a stellar affair to get to. A great weekend of CanWest football. Let's take you to our other two conferences. Let's hop out to the other coast quickly, where we had Acadia pick up their first win of the season against Mount Allison, 20-11. Not terrible amount of commentary on that one. I think the game that really have a bit more of a discussion about is Bishops laying the smackdown on St. FX, 29-3. St. FX coming off the big win against Mount Allison, and Bishops coming off the big loss to St. Mary's, who's sitting on the bye. And though I don't think either of us were able to get around to watch this entire game, obviously the thing that jumps out off the top is the fact that you go for St. FX, you look at the quarterback play, and there's no Silas Fagnon in sight, and Sam Tremblay Tremblay, 3 for 19, the 2 interceptions. Obviously, that's not going to win you games, especially knowing this is a really strong Bishop's defense. Justin Quirion had his best game of the season, perhaps at 29 for 37 and 3 touchdowns. O'Shea Hosang had a solid game running the ball. And I think what we're seeing is obviously without Fagnon in there, like St. FX, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to put money on them against, Bishops or St. Mary's of, okay, St. Mary's with Shipley really took a jump this year. And I think Bishops is still a strong team that, again, in a wounded St. FX team in this one don't know where what the Fagnon story is. Clearly, they can still flex their muscles in a game like this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, when you look at this St. FX squad, first and foremost, even if Silas is in there, you have to be thinking, okay, we have to limit Malcolm Busey. We have to make sure that, or Bussey, that he's not going off. And that's exactly what they did. 9 attempts for 20 yards. Like, this was a dominating showcase from that Bishops team. Their total offense for St. FX is 85. Like they did nothing when they had the ball, and that's more so speaking to the outstanding capabilities of this Bishop's defense more than anything here. But anytime you don't have a Silas Fagnon back there, you're gonna have some issues. But to have a dominating performance like this is incredible. You read off the numbers for Curion, but the amount of guys who caught the ball, Noah Blas, Timotei, you know what? I don't want to butcher name after name here. There was a lot of names a lot of people that caught balls here. And once again, just showcasing the growth and the capabilities that Curion has and why they were Lonely Bowl champions last year. But yes, the more and more that we're looking at this, even if Silas is in there, if this is the dominating fashion, it looks like this is going to be a Bishops versus St. Mary's Lonely Bowl.
It's certainly starting to shape up that way. And again, not just the fact that they contain Bussy, but Caleb Fogarty was the leading rusher last year, and they stifled him as well. So again, I think that game last week was more of just a St. Mary's adding to that really strong defense they showed last year in nearly upsetting Bishops, and obviously a St. FX team that without their guy in Silas just isn't going to really be able to put up the day that they would want to. Let's finish off with the RSEQ. Firstly, to acknowledge Sherbrooke picking up their first win on the season with a 26-13 win at home against Concordia. But what we have to talk about, obviously, is Laval versus Montreal. And the final score, Montreal 38, Laval 28. Allez les bleus, allez les bleus. Shout out to our friends at Le Montagnard. And I think that, I'm going to be curious to see what happens with the USports top 10 as a result of this. And obviously, seeing a 10-point difference in a game between these two teams is startling. Frankly, seeing this many points is a bit startling. And there's a couple beats of the game I want to go over in specific where it really turned the tide to give Montreal that jump. Because they're not like just whether they end up lifting up the, I forget what they renamed the Dunsmore Cup, the Coupe Dunsmore. Maybe you can pull that up for me. But whether or not they end up RSEQ champs this year, they aren't 10-point favorites over Laval. There was a couple key moments early in the game that just gave Montreal the jump on Laval, that just, though Laval came back, and obviously it's a 14-1 game after the first quarter, that jump that Montreal had off the start just kept it out of reach. But Tom, you also, I think, from our Montreal friends, it was bullish of us to think that Laval was going to go into Montreal and pick up the win, specifically playing, at Montreal Stadium. Because what is it now? How many in a row has Montreal won in this matchup at home now?
I believe I need to confirm this, but I believe it's since Arnaud Desjardins has been the quarterback for the Laval Rouge et Or. But Montreal is 8-0 when playing against Laval in Montreal. That is, to be perfect against a Laval team anywhere is unbelievable, but especially at home in your own conference is unbelievable.
No, it's remarkable, and we've both had experiences playing against Montreal, and Coach Ida Luca, and just what a terrific job that he's been doing there, and really seeing, like, you talking about the way that you see the stands from the camera view, where where the camera is positioned in the grandstand, one of the things that makes Montreal such a intimidating place to play is the overhang that really increases the sound of the crowd. They're right on top of you. They're just screaming at you in French. But then on the other side, having those stands that go right down close to the sideline on a few plays where a player is getting like kind of pushed right into these like blow up signs to kind of ease the burn of them going to the stands, and like the fans are right there. So it's just like what an incredible moment. Tom, did you get the name of the new what is
Dussault.
it? Sorry, say again.
Dussault.
Do so, and maybe we can get a bit more of that as we approach the U Sport playoffs and the conference championships. But very much, we'll do a bit of story time about that and the individual it's now named after and their impact with Quebec football, generally speaking. But just the two moments that for Montreal obviously turned the tide was one, the pick six from Arnaud Desjardins early in the game. I'm trying to find if I can pull up who got it for Montreal, but there was clearly some kind of miscommunication. The receiver, it looked like Arnaud was expecting him to do an outbreaking route. The receiver just kind of stopped it, and whoever that was, was it Elijah? Oh, it was Elijah Creme. Okay, amazing. I mean, one of the greats of that defense, kind of tying it back to those incredible like all-time defenses they had 2 years ago. So you have that mistake, but the last drive for Montreal in the first half, where it starts off Laval pinning them deep on a punt on Montreal's 5 yard line. I don't remember who the gunner was, but lays the wood on the Montreal returner. And then our guy, in Pepe Gonzalez, starting on the 5 yard line, starting with a play where he's having to scramble out, reverse pivot. He's in the end zone where all of a sudden now it's like a holding call and you get the safety giving up those points. But not only does he, make a play happen there, he has a couple of huge plays hooking up with, I believe it was Simon Riopel for a major 38-yard reception, one of the nicest catches I've seen all season long, but leading to a touchdown with, I think when Laval got the ball back, they just needed out. There was maybe 8 seconds left. The pick six early on a mistake somewhere for Laval offensively, but then that drive, getting that touchdown with, I think it was less than a minute, having to drive the whole field. Again, Laval had a nice day. We can go through the numbers. Maybe not Arnaud's best day that we've ever seen. That's a high bar to set, but there's a few of those moments. And what we're seeing from Pepe in filling in for a Heck Crichton has been really impressive to see.
No kidding. And when you see a Montreal squad, one of the big things, and you can hear it even in some of the McMaster talk when we played against them in that 2011 Vanier Cup. But the idea is like, if you are ever able to get a behemoth like Laval off their feet, you've got to land as many haymakers as you possibly can before they start to recompose themselves. Because once again, the score going into halftime here is 28-15. Montreal only scores another 10 points in this game, and Laval roars back in order to make this a close game. The final score 38-28 here. So obviously they made some changes and Laval played a lot better in that second half, certainly going into the second quarter, into that second half. But this is a credit to Montreal starting fast and taking advantage of things. I mean, the very first play of the game is a kickoff to Laval with a fumble. So Montreal takes over at
Yes.
their like Laval's 20-yard line. They punch it in immediately. So it's 7-0 before anybody can even look. Arnaud Desjardins is expecting the ball, and now he's immediately down. And then you force a team safety, you force two team safeties, and then a field goal and another touchdown. And by the end of beginning of the second quarter, it's 21-1 for Montreal. That's a big task for anybody to get over, even if you are the Laval Rouge et Or. So credit to this Montreal squad doing their thing. And Pepe, I can't remember if we've gone over the numbers, but I just want to make sure we do it again. 25 for 34, 344 yards, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's the kind of stat line you need if you're going to beat a Laval squad here. I was chatting back and forth with our friends at Les Montagnards, and I mentioned to them, it would be really nice to see that run game get a little bit better for Montreal. And they said, well, yes, I agree. Running in between the tackles against the Laval front seven is damn near impossible. It just doesn't happen, period. I think that's where Coach Constantine, obviously being a former defensive lineman, that is his bread and butter, that is that front seven there, and nobody can really do that effectively. So while the Blues fans are certainly hoping that the run game gets a little bit better, they know it's level their expectations when it comes to the Rouge et Or.
Well, and a front seven that's like I don't know the names off the top of my head. I don't have all the eligibility years off the top of my head either, but is made up of so many like second and third year guys, which is just like bananas. Because on the flip side, again, just to look at Laval still able to just run their game when, and thank you for bringing that up again, that opening kickoff fumble. But Mathieu Roy, 81 yards on the ground against a Montreal defense that we still know is really strong. Olivier Cool, as to be expected, leading the way in the receiving core with 107 on 6 catches and a touchdown. And I can't remember if it was his touchdown or Nathan Carignan, but one was a really nice like slant and go, and Desjardins just hit him perfectly. You know, Desjardins 33 for 45 with 309, 3 touchdowns, the 1 interception that something went wrong on that one, and it just came back to bite them so epically. But just to be expected, an epic matchup between these two teams. I just wanted to again, I think it's important to recognize that we weren't privy to that, just how big an advantage it's been for Montreal playing at home. And again, in some of your conversations with Montagnard, that it seemed like, again, with that crowd being really on top of the field, that they were getting maybe Arnaud off his game a little bit. But all that to say, if him putting up the day he still put up today is him being off his game, it just speaks to how darn good Laval is. It's not a 10-point difference between this team, even if Montreal has the advantage at home in the slightest. They made crucial plays when it mattered that allowed them to get up early. Laval fought back. Classic matchup between these two. Under the lights, Friday night, just so spectacular. What a time it would have been to have been there. Tom, final thoughts across the league on a terrific weekend of USports football.
You said it, man. What an incredible week. And it really just hit home because one of my favorite interactions of the entire week is the phone call that you and I have earlier today, where you're asking, hey, I didn't really have great reception at Dakota's wedding. Like, give me an update. Like, what happened here? Oh my God. You did that. Oh my God. Like 8 times when I'm telling you, yeah, Montreal won, Bishops blew out, and like all of this stuff. So, what an incredible time to be a U Sports fan, first and foremost. I love the fact that you and I are branching out more and more to start covering these games as best as we can across the country. And I can't wait for next week when I'm sure we're going to see another list of phenomenal games.
And when we have our first game day live for the At the 55 Bowl, go check the tapes if you didn't get to watch them last year. And as always, just whether it's the game day lives, as we alluded to, doing a bit more of the CanWest coverage, please give us your feedback. Tell us what things you want to see and what you want us to be able to do to increase the exposure for these incredible young men playing, young athletes, I should say, playing in this league, because what is on the field week after week is tremendous. We actually had some comments that came on the YouTube page and on Reddit that we'll save for Thursday when we do the week 5 preview. We'll have Tom's interview with Coach Nil coming out soon. So much content. Of course, though he's married, the meme god is still going to be producing all your favorite content on the social media side of things, that being Dakota Vine. So Tom, I can't wait to be breaking down, although it brings us to the midway point of the season, week 5 coming up later this week, right here at the 55.